Hi everyone, this is Rob Watson, the module leader for TECH1002, Social Media and Technology. I'm back again. That was a week's wait to get me again talking about the content of the module. This is a second of our exam revision sessions. So what we'll be covering is the four remaining sections that are identified in the exam, so we'll go through them. Remember that the exam is structured into two components. The first component is 4 questions that are compulsory. Section A is compulsory. That's based on network culture, collaboration, play and gamification, and participation. And we covered these topics in the lecture 22 the other week. This section, section B, is 4 questions from 8. Last week we covered affordances and constraints, spreadable media, collective intelligence, and future media. And this week we're going to cover multimodality, media sharing, music sharing and participation power, and cultural ownership. So these are based on the 4 textbooks that we identified and that you were given the names of at the beginning of the term and were in the module handbook and have been on the module wiki. That's the Delwish and Henderson book, the Participatory Cultures Handbook, the Jenkins, Ford and Green book, Spreadable Media, the Jones and Hafner book, Understanding Digital Literacies, and the Rheingold book, NetSmart's How to Thrive Online. Remember that these were identified on the wiki with the reading for each particular week that was recommended, and any that was relevant to the exam had an E marked on it, and that's been available on the wiki all the way through the year. So hopefully you've had a head start with getting your reading done. If you want to get a chance to look at past papers, they're available at the DMU library, so go to library.dmu.ac.uk and just look for the ExamNet, or you could search on Google for DMU ExamNet. I tend to find it that way. And then when you're there, just look for the TECH1002 papers. This year I've made a bit of a change. One of the things that's different is the way the points are worked out on the exam. So each of the questions are worth the same amount. So there's 15 points for each question, which adds up to 120 points. But what I'll then do is I'll work that out as a percentage of 100%, obviously. The kind of questions that you will be presented with, they're kind of really asking you to do 2 things, which is to state or identify. They're not asking you to discuss or to speculate or to explain or debate. These are questions really which I just really want you to tell me what the people who've written the books and the sections of the books, what they're about and what they have said. It's a question of finding out if you have absorbed that information and that you're able to repeat that information. I'm not particularly interested in you relating this to your personal experience. I'm not interested in your personal opinion. There may be circumstances where you might use examples, but they will be based on verifiable alternative sources, such as discussions in national newspapers of standing, such as the Telegraph, the Guardian, the Times, the Independent, that kind of newspaper. So the style of answers that I'm looking for is, you can write this in bullet points. I'm not looking for debate and discussion. I'm not looking for an argument to be laid out. I kind of really want you to kind of relate the key points. So in that respect, what I'm looking for is for precision, and I'm looking for you to clearly state what the issues are. I'm not looking for more than is stated in the chapters, really. So your answers, they shouldn't really be discursive. You're not really engaging in an argument. You're not weighing the relative merits of different things. They're based on what is stated in the chapters. You can use impersonal examples, as I've just said, but just make sure that they're from verifiable sources, i.e. mainstream media, and that they're not subjective and they're not speculative and they're not based on your own opinions or your own experiences or anything you've kind of made up in your head that might kind of fit in with this. You know, it happens in exams. You know, I'm happy for it. You know, it's lovely, but it's not what I want to read on the paper. And I'd rather be honest with you now and tell you that this is what I want and this is what I'm looking for, so that you're not under an impression that you can think about doing something else. We will talk about this in the workshop sessions when we do our revision activities and exercises. So be objective and keep to the point is the challenge. Think of it this way: if you are writing an entry for Wikipedia entry, that's the best way to think of it. So stick to the facts, don't speculate. So the exam is composed of two sections. Section A is compulsory, so that's about network culture, collaboration, playing gamification and participation, which we covered in week 22. The section B is divided up into 8 sections, the first four we looked at last week, so that was affordances and constraints, spreadable media, collective intelligence, future media and multimodality. This week we're going to be looking at, you can find it. We're going to be looking at multimodality this week, followed by media sharing, followed by music sharing and participation power, followed by cultural ownership. So multimodality is based on the Jones and Hafner chapter 4, and really the question is about how screen-based media culture has moved and is different from text-based, kind of book-based kind of media culture, which is static and which is linear and which is time-based. You have to read it in a sequence. Whereas games and multimedia and websites, they're based on interactivity, they're based on being navigable, so it requires they use audio, they use visuals, they use interactive elements, they use graphics, they use video. So we have to learn a different set of literacies and skills. Our know-how has to adapt to be able to use all of the technical affordances and the media affordances that new media and kind of interactive media offers. We then look at the debate about media sharing, which is represented by Jenkins, Ford and Green in chapter 6 of their Spreadable Media book. And really we're asking the question, in what way is the media sharing model different from the broadcast media model? So this goes into a bit more detail about the idea that, we kind of traditionally mass media was based around a very specific way of producing content, which was defined by a small number of people in the centre, and they were driven by lots of marketing and advertising. Whereas the new media model is kind of collaborative. It's based around relationships. The relationship between the producer and the audience is very different. It's driven by a sense of collaboration, a sense of co-production. If you think to something like Star Wars The Force Awakens, and the way that the expectation and the way that you listen to J.J. Abrams in his commentary for that film, what they were desperately trying to do was capture the energy of the fans in order to turn it into a product. If that made it into a good film, an auteured film, that's maybe a different discussion. But did the fans and the expectation of the fans drive what that film was about? So the relationship, through cosplay conventions, Comic-Con, through the sale of products and toys and games and all those kind of things, they redefine how we think about media. And the question is that any media producer needs to ask is this shareable? Is this something that will resonate with people and they will pass around? So the sense of promotion and the sense of discussion that goes with media is very different from the mass media model. This brings us into thinking about the Howard Rheingold chapter, which is music sharing and participatory power. And really what we're thinking about with this is kind of, well, what is it that people share? What is it that look for, what makes it easy for people to share things? Why do people want to share content? And in the process of sharing content, we have to think about redefining what we mean by participatory culture. So Rheingold identifies some principles about membership of virtual communities and what we do to encourage access to virtual communities. And he also talks about what we have to value in those communities in terms of a sense of, if we're a social media producer, we have to think about persuading people to access and use our content. We have to curate our content. We have to enable people to talk about it and discuss it. And in a way, we have to present ourselves in order to be kind of credible and authentic with people, plausible at least. What makes you put trust into a media producer? That's a good question for us to ask in the shared media age. So this brings us into a question about, which is the Owen Gallagher chapter in the Delwish and Henderson book, which is chapter 10, which is about cultural ownership. And one of the challenges that new media presents to old media is the sense of ownership of the rights and the ownership, the copyright. And in an age when media can be very, very quickly mashed up and remixed, and even before a film's out, the trailers get remixed, and the fan films that are produced. We live in a world now where there's a constant collaboration between fans and networks of people who are interested in particular forms of media that challenges the ownership status of the large-scale industrial corporate producers. What do we mean in this context by cultural ownership? How does the law keep pace with this kind of change and shift in people's interests? How will the remixing techniques of the future impact on the kind of wider cultural landscape and where people can generate profits and money and corporate interests which are separate from the kind of fan networks and the fan communities? Right, so we've covered a lot in the year. These are going to be kind of headline examinations and kind of key issues, summaries. It's going to be, you can do the more in-depth reading in order to back up and support the content of what you'll be writing in the exam. We'll also be undertaking some revision exercises in the workshops, and I'll try and make them as creative, and we will have lots of conversations and discussions based around each week, based around the different elements of each of the sections that we're going to be covering. So hopefully this all hasn't been too much. Nearly 12 minutes long. I've gone on quite a bit today, but I'll see you at the lecture on Thursday.